Hello everyone and welcome to the Johnny Appleseed Organic Village. I'm here again today with Shannie McCabe from Creek Heirloom Seeds for the second part of our series on growing tomatoes. This is the mid-season episode, you might say, where we're going to work on pruning them and I think a little bit of trellising, which if you'll recall from our first video was frightening to me. However, once again, Shannie has laid my fears to rest and assured me that we will be fine. So Shannie, why don't you take it from here?
Sure. So today we're going to talk about pruning, getting rid of suckers, and we're also going to demystify a little process I like to call the Florida weave.
Before we get to that, sounds like a waltz, not anything to do with gardening, but besides that, what is a sucker?
Ah, right. Okay. Gonna have to teach you what a sucker is. All right. So suckers are something, first of all, let me just say, some people insist on removing suckers from their plants. Some people leave them. It's a preference thing, but I want to put my hat in the ring for removing suckers. I think it's an unnecessary suck of energy when we could have the plant giving energy to the fruit. So I say remove suckers. Some people in the comment thread are going to say leave the suckers. It's just a preference thing, but we're going to remove ours today.
Awesome.
So a sucker is actually this. Do you see this little piece right here? How we've got a main stem, we've got a side branch, and then we have this little extra guy growing in between. It's coming up from, I would call that an axillary bud. So it's coming up from in between the crotch of the little side branch and the main stem. So when they're small like this, we actually just pop them off really easily. But sometimes Shannies neglect their tomato plants and the suckers get really big and out of control. And you have to pull out a pair of pruners.
Right.
And do some surgery.
Interesting point though, would that not eventually grow like a viable branch?
Yes, it will. However, it's really going to weigh down the plant. It's going to make the shape of the plant like super bushy. And we really want to train our tomatoes up. We want to remove a lot of this under canopy growth because it's not actually doing a lot of great photosynthesizing. It's so low on the plant, it's not catching a lot of sunlight, it's not really feeding the plant really well. And most importantly, down here in the deep south in Georgia, we're just gonna have more issues of bad airflow if we have more foliage. The more foliage and the more dense the plant is, the worse the airflow is gonna be. So we're gonna clean these plants up, we're gonna take out that excess foliage so that we're getting more optimal photosynthesizing and we're getting way better airflow. So let's clean them up.
Awesome, let's do it.
Okay, cool. So ideally, we are trying to prune out our suckers and do our lower leaf pruning when the plants are a bit smaller than this, just to keep them trained and with a better shape. But if you let it go and you don't get to the pruning stage until a little bit later in the plant's life, it's okay. So really, after we prune out our suckers, the next thing we're going to take out is just unnecessary lower foliage that's really, it's not even catching sunlight because it's caught underneath all these top leaves, and it's really just making the plant more cluttered and clogging up airspace. So these lower leaves, they're not really catching much sunlight. I'm just going to remove them. Yeah, sometimes they have fruit on them. You can choose to save the fruit, or you could be a little more hardcore with your pruning. I like to take out my lower leaves, especially if you've got leaves that are touching the ground and getting spotty, definitely take those out. But we're just removing some of those lower leaves and we're gonna allow all this top growth to really soak up the sunlight, and we're gonna get great airflow down here. And that's basically how it's done. We're just going to clean up the space and let the air flow better. And the unnecessary lower leaves that are barely catching any light anyway, they're gonna go away. All right, so trellising tomatoes, here are a few important notes to make. First of all, we really do need something pretty sturdy. Tomatoes can get pretty heavy, and if you get a good wind, they could get knocked right over. So we've chosen some pretty good, sturdy bamboo stakes for the job. And if you can get good, clean, straight bamboo stakes, that's excellent. You also may find wooden stakes that are about like an inch and they're kind of more square shaped. Those are pretty common. Some people even use T-posts. Whatever you find, just make sure that it's nice and sturdy. I use a rubber mallet to drive it in just to make sure that we're really, really solid. So we drive in our stakes. I like to put stakes at every 4 tomatoes. We talked in the last episode about how we put our tomatoes at about a 2-foot spacing. So we've got about 8 feet, a little bit less, between our stakes. We've got 4 tomatoes in between stakes, and now we're going to do the Florida weave. Okay, So I've heard it called other things. I've heard it called the California weave. I guess everybody wants to claim this technique because it's pretty genius. But essentially, what we're going to do is we're gonna start down low on the pole, and we're going to take our natural twine. You can use hemp, you can use sisal twine, whatever you got. There are benefits and drawbacks to anyone that you choose. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but you get your twine, you keep it nice and taut, and you're just going to run it around the pole a couple times. 1, 2, make sure it's nice and tight, and then you're going to run it back. I've seen people where they tie it at the end. I don't usually tie it, I just wrap it a few times, run it back, making sure that I'm basically corralling the plants in between my two parallel pieces of twine. Keeping things tight. Always remember that this has to stay taut. If this is like loose and saggy, it's really not going to be a reliable trellis for your tomatoes. So we're keeping it tight, and then we're going to tie it off. And this is level 1 of our Florida weave, of our tomato trellis system. So we're tying it once. We can even, we'll double or triple knot it, whatever you got to do. But this is level 1. Then we're going to cut it, and we're going to go to level 2. Now, if you were trellising your tomatoes when they're smaller, you're probably just going to put down level 1 and then come back in a couple weeks when they get taller and add level 2. But as we said, we're late to the game, so we're going to add 2 levels while we're here right now. So now we're going level 2, and we've got our string. Again, we're keeping it tight. We've got it right about here. I'm wrapping it around a few times. P.S. I'm just showing you on this 1 4-foot section, but you're actually going to run it all the way down your row. So basically, again, remember, the principle is we're corralling the plants in. And now you're going to kind of see why it was important for us. To prune that lower foliage and really get the plants cleaned up before we work with them. Because as you can see, they're really a lot easier to tame and keep under control when they're nicely pruned and they don't have all that excess foliage and side branching going on. So then we come back around and we can kind of manipulate the branches so that they settle and sort of stay nice and snug with the plants. And each plant is just sort of snug in this little weave situation here. And as the plants get taller, we add more levels, just like this. And as I said before, we can go all the way down the row. You don't have to do it in sections like that. You actually will just keep wrapping it down the row as you go, but I just want to show you in this little section. So folks, that's the Florida weave, and the next time we visit these tomatoes, we're going to be picking and harvesting them.
Awesome. Thank you guys for joining us for this video on mid-season care for tomatoes. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll check out Johnny Appleseed Organic on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook.
Yep, and check out Creek Heirloom Seeds. We've got Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and we are RareSeeds on YouTube.
And don't forget to check back as the season continues, because as always, we're going to continue to track these, do more maintenance. I will learn more things. I will stop thinking of gardening terms as dances I've never heard of, and eventually we will cook something with the tomatoes that we've grown.
Absolutely, can't wait.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks.